I sure did. Okay, so to start with here this afternoon, we're going to have Kelly and Steve kind of do a little panel, go through some more slides, talk about what they're doing. Kelly and Steve live about 30 miles apart. Steve does agronomy work for Kelly, so they're a pretty good pair, and I think they've got some good stuff to share.
All right, so the slides that we're going to have are going to be just around nutrition. I plagiarized them off of Mosaic's website, cropnutrition.com. It's a great resource. I think everybody should go there. But what I wanted to be able to discuss and have Kelly and I share is just a little bit about each nutrient and what we are doing on our farms, what Kelly's doing on his farm, and a little bit why we're doing that. And then hopefully this will be more of an open discussion. Okay, so just please, something comes to mind, ask, because it's that will make it a much more informative session. We're pretty formal. Yeah. So, you have anything to add, Kelly, on?
When I started with Steve in 2015, I thought I was doing a pretty good job. He's ruined all that by teaching me all the things. The more I learn, the more I know I'm doing wrong. I now have PTSD from being involved with Steve.
Post-traumatic disorder.
I had hair, and he wasn't so gray in the goatee area when we started.
It's true. Yeah. And I'm the brains, and he's the looks.
I owe a lot of my success to Steve. Obviously, he has to be the brains because he's not the looks.
So we're just going to go through and run down through different nutrients and why these nutrients are important. Because so often in agriculture and farming, we're paying attention to maybe 2 or 3 different nutrients. And that's a problem. You have to have a complete understanding of what all the nutrients are doing in the plant and then how you can influence those nutrients. There's a whole host of things around soil chemistry, soil biology, and Kelly and I will talk a lot about how important soil pH is, because when you manage soil pH, you manage nutrients and soil biology. So Kelly's got a lot of high pH on his farms. So do I. We're in the western part of Iowa in the Les Hills, so there's a lot of calcareous soils, so a lot of high pH, and that's been one of the biggest struggles. So the first thing on the list is nitrogen. And nitrogen is the building blocks of amino acids and proteins. We do things a little bit different when we look at nitrogen. And so one of the first interactions that Kelly and I had, we were discussing nitrogen, and I wagered with him on how we should be managing nitrogen based on the soil conditions. You want to share that story?
So we're doing variable rate nitrogen first year, and he tells me that we're going to range from 140 to 240 pounds of nitrogen per acre. You know, it's going to change. We're basing this kind of off the yield map is how we would go. And he tells me in the high yielding areas, we're only going to put 140 pounds of nitrogen. And in the low yielding areas, we're going to put 240 pounds of nitrogen. And I said, well, that's really dumb. That's exactly backwards from what it should be. And he bet me $100 that he was right, and I lost. We took stock nitrate tests in the high yielding areas of the field. We're no-till. In the high yielding areas of the field, we took stock nitrate tests. It was high in nitrates. In the low yielding areas of the field, we took stock nitrate tests. They're low. And that's because in a high yielding no-till system, we believe there's up to 150 pounds of elemental nitrogen right there. So we want to use that. And instead of managing by the acre, we want to manage by the square foot, or we want to basically manage by how often the yield map takes a sample. You know, how often was that? Every 15 seconds, 30 seconds, you can change it. That's how we manage. The data points need to be as tight as possible. So, yeah, I mean, it is opposite. Our yields are going up because we're trying to amend some of those low yielding areas on my farm are thin, high calcareous, high pH, nasty dirt. Needs more nitrogen, needs more sulfur in those areas, and that's how we do it.
Anybody have any thoughts or questions about why we do that? Anyone disagree with that philosophy?
A conventional agronomist, you know, like I know how to work with nutrient, they want to write their maps, their variable rate maps, exactly opposite, because they're working off of the crop removal chart, which is accurate, but they're just not giving enough credit to what we have there in our soil, what we're building. My son is a junior in agronomy at Iowa State, and he had to write a variable rate map for one class. And I said, well, you're going to write your nitrogen map the way we do it or the way nutrient does it? And he said, well, Dad, if I do it the way you and Steve do it, I'll flunk. I can't do it that way.
Just real quick, I'm not kidding around it. On my little farm, the low yielding areas are the tops of the hills.
Yes, absolutely. I would have paid you $100 on that too.
I would almost take your wager if you want to put more nitrogen out there, without water.
So what does nitrogen provide? It depends on the form that you're applying it in, right? So Kelly, in his example, he uses anhydrous. And anhydrous has hydrogen with it. So in a high pH environment, what we're missing is hydrogen. And we have to buffer against that. Okay, so there's all different forms. I'm not going to get into the weeds on all the different things that are going on there. Ultimately, what we have to do is drive a more productive system so that we can build the biology so we can actually try to improve that environment. So if on the top of the hills, and this goes back to the carrying capacity, if on the top of the hills, let's say you're producing 140 bushel corn. I'm just going to throw out a number. Okay, let's say it's 100 bushel. How many plants per acre do you have out there? 14,000. So under my math, 14,000 plants should produce 140 bushel corn. So how much nitrogen do I need to achieve that yield? That's it. In Kelly's environment, I can look at the resources and I can say, here's how we need to reallocate the resources, and we can take a 160 bushel environment and turn it into a 260 bushel environment. Because those are the limitations. Everyone is different. If you tell me that you get this much water, okay, so Kelly gets 30 inches of rainfall, which means if we do everything right, his average yield on his farm should be around 300 bushel. Now, if you supplement it, that should get you more bushels. But if you don't have the water, you're right. You can't. You got to have all those ingredients. Nitrogen will make your plant more efficient with those resources. The way that we derive this information is from soybeans. How many people apply nitrogen on soybeans? What percentage of the nitrogen do soybeans get from themselves? It depends. Good agronomist answer, right? Depends on soil pH. So if I have a high pH area, what's your soybean yield like in a high pH area if you don't do anything else? You just go out and you plant soybeans. 45 bushel. Depends. Depends. If it's 45 bushel, and I'm going to use 40 bushel just because for easy math. If it takes 5 pounds per bushel, that's 200 pounds of nitrogen. Okay? So why did that plant only produce 40 bushel? Because that was all the nitrogen we had available in the system. And again, I'm an observationist. Where do the soybean leaves turn first?
I bet they're at the top of the hill on your farm, sir. Yep. Your pH is high, all your nutrients are tied up, and your crop ran out of groceries.
Of which the grocery might be water. But I don't know. How much water do you get? 15 inches of water. So 15 inches of water we got to figure out now. When you're on the top of a hill, water runs off, right?
I figure that's why it's better than the low place.
Well, it helps. I mean, you're getting 20 inches in the low spots and 10 on the top. But all of those factor into making decisions because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But the logic still applies. You just have to tailor what you're getting to the expected result. And that was the first part of the conversation. You should still be able to produce 0.6 of a pound of grain on that plant if you match what you're doing to the carrying capacity of the soil. So here's a little bit about what nitrogen does: protein, amino acids. Nitrogen is mobile in the plant, so it will move around. Now that comes at a little bit of a cost to the plant in terms of energy. If all you do is take up nitrate nitrogen, there is a penalty to that. Ammonium will go directly in and form structures, and it takes less energy to do that. So ammonium, especially in grasses, is an important thing.
Wait, remember that chart that Kurt had, and it dipped down, then it went back up in nitrogen one? It's because it's not out there soon enough. That's the one thing we found. It's got to be out there sooner. And I think that chart could also be your stress level when you're taking a tissue sample, because you're like, I'm doing okay, and then your nitrogen's way low, then your stress is way up. We learned the same thing. It's got to be out there sooner.
So everything that we've done around tissue testing has really been, what do we do with this, right? That's what we've learned. What do we actually do with it? Well, what it is it's a measurement of what we've done. So the only way that you can change that result is to have a plan and then measure, did my plan actually do what I thought it was going to do?
It's a bad idea if you think that's going to be an indicator, because if you have a problem on your tissue test, it is already too late.
So all we do is make a plan. Here's the trajectory that we want to be on, and here's the results that we want to have align with our thought process. And if they don't align, you got to go back to the plan, because you're too late in tissue testing. And there's other stuff that people are doing, I don't know. I mean, raising plants to me is just a mathematical problem. Bill told me it's like a factory. You want to produce X number of trucks, but you forget that little widget that controls the ABS. It's broken, right? And that's what all of these nutrients are doing. You've got to have all those pieces in there. There's probably things that we don't even know. I mean, we're talking about soil biology like we have some understanding. I mean, we know less about what's going on under our feet than anything else on planet Earth. We're just getting into that space. And I think we'll uncover new and exciting things as we move along, but what we do know is how much it takes to produce that plant. And a lot of people talk about their nitrogen use efficiency. Well, nitrogen use efficiency is just a reflection of what you captured for free, because it still took that much nitrogen to produce that plant. So don't limit yourself in yield chasing in-use efficiency. Because if you're right on the ledge of carrying capacity, then that's the yield that you're going to get. Phosphorus. So phosphorus is all about energy transfer. And on Kelly's farm, we basically have one phosphorus solution right now. I mean, we're looking at doing some other things potentially, but you want to share a little bit about plant food?
We have a product. It comes from a food company. We call it plant food. 500 gallons of plant food. The challenge of the product is the volume, but 500 gallons of plant food has 105 pounds of phosphorus in it, and it's highly available. 1152O, there's a study at the University of Minnesota that I read. 1152O is only 48% available. So you go put 100 pounds out, you got 25 pounds of phosphate. You just don't have enough. And with we put the plant food out. It's available and it's inexpensive, and we can put it through the drip. We spray it over the top, and there's the December averages out of each plant of what's in the plant food. You can see out of 118 pounds out of Sioux City and 108 pounds out of Des Moines. Those are the two plants we get it out of. You can tell I do need Steve in the brains operation because I own a lot of semis and I feed cattle, so I can be very smart. But the plant food has been a real game changer for us because of the inexpensiveness of it and what it does for our crop. And somebody said, how many pounds of sulfur are you putting on? With Oscar Hill. How many pounds of sulfur are you putting on? Yes. I'm putting 120 pounds of sulfur on every acre. On my irrigated ground, I'm putting twice that on. With my soils being very calcareous, then there's another conventional agronomist, not crazy like Steve, and he tells me at some point my yields are going to crash because of all the sulfur I'm putting on. There's so much calcium in my soil, that sulfur is immediately tied up, basically forms gypsum. And, you know, these people, they keep wanting to tell me that I'm wanting to put too much sulfur on all the time. If it wasn't for plant food and you went into a conventional agronomy spot, they're going to want you to put gypsum on it like a ton to the acre. We figured out the other day how much sulfur is in a ton of gypsum. It's 340 pounds. You know, it's just that my point is you have to look at what you're doing on your farms. That's one thing I've learned from Steve. Look at what you're doing on your farm and don't listen to everybody else. Nobody knows it better than you guys. You know, I mean, 20 or 40 pounds of sulfur, it's not enough. But when Oscar said that, he's talking about what the crop needs in his defense. The sulfur for me is a soil amendment, inverse of line. It's solving my soil problems. Yes, sir.
So, it will tell you, eventually it'll burn all organic matter out because we'll make it so live, it'll just keep itself alive. How many years have you been doing that?
4. My yields keep getting better. You know what else I'm producing every year? More calcium. I'm producing more calcium every year.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the sulfur's combined with the calcium, it goes away. The next year it's back. It's like the taxes, the calcium never quits coming. You know, so I disagree.
That was a good question again.
Are you gonna burn through your organic matter?
In what way?
If the sulfur feeds the enzymes and it's gonna break it down faster.
So this goes back to chasing the carbon load that you want to create, right? So you want to, really what we should all be after is a carbon system. That's what we should pay attention to. Now, if I'm producing little teeny tiny plants, that's a whole lot less carbon than if I'm producing a big plant that's packed full of dense nutritional with all the stuff in it. The biggest risk to our carbon load is erosion in Kelly's terrain. The only way we can protect that is to produce more plant material, whether that's through cover crops, through high yields, whatever. Where does the carbon live? Most of it lives in the root system. Now, that's better as you go to perennial crops, but in corn production, if you can produce a big root, that's good. The other thing that influences organic material. So what does organic material give you? It gives you some stable nutrients. There's a whole variety of things. But if we're living in Minnesota, our organic matter is innately higher than if I live in Florida because I have a longer time to break it down. But that breakdown isn't necessarily a problem, assuming you're sinking it into a carbon pool, right? Because you got to look at the carbon as a whole system. The reason that you're building organic matter or have higher organic matter in northern latitudes is just a function of the carbon's in a different state. So I don't feel that we're at risk of losing it. We're at risk of losing it if we don't produce highly, fed nutrition plants. We're at risk of losing it versus too much microbial activity. If we had a whole bunch of microbial activity, I'd be tickled. But the reality is we don't.
I wish I could burn more up. With the way our yields have gone up, the integrity of our corn stalks, with the amount of potassium we put on, I've got a problem. If I can't spray plant food or put my cows on my corn stalk field, my soybean stand suffers. I am. Yes. The soybean stand suffers without having those cows out there on those stalks.
Where are you getting that out of, Sioux City?
It's the name of the company's Feed Energy. We truck for them, we truck in their ingredients, and we haul the plant food out. So it's my main source of fertilizer.
Plant food, like
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
an organic fertilizer then?
No, it's not considered organic because of the sulfuric acid that when they're doing their process with the things we haul in, they put sulfuric acid in it, and for that reason, it cannot be considered organic.
So let's talk a little bit about the pH of this product and why I like this product through drip. What's the pH here?
The pH of this product is 1. If you don't have stainless or plastic, it'll make all your containers religious. And we have proven, yes, it will. It'll eat your t-shirt, it'll eat the steel, it'll eat everything. And I never thought I'd have the word stainless steel, and I still can, but my employees can. So, but this product for us in our soils, and really in anybody's soils, because of the availability of the phosphorus, and it's inexpensive. But for me, it's a soil amendment and fertilizer. We have 3 applicators. They're hog manure applicators with 60 or 70 foot booms sprayed on them, or welded on, pardon me. We spray it over the top. You know, and it's like you talk about the carbon transfer, things like that. In the fall of the year, when we can get started and spray it when it's before it's frozen, then it really aids in the rotting, you know, breaking down of the corn stalks. Yes, sir.
What's that run?
Within 25 miles of our storage, we will apply for 13 cents a gallon. So 500 gallons is $65 an acre. There's in that analysis, there's about $110 worth of dry fertilizer right there. That's when I say it's inexpensive.
And he runs it through his drip system. Pretty much anytime he's pumping water, he's running it with his drip.
I do. So the first year, Steve and I were talking about it. We didn't think it worked because, you know, we're rookies in this irrigation thing, and emitters are supposed to be so fragile. So we meet Kurt and we show him the sample, and he said he thinks it'll work. At this time, Steve didn't have irrigation yet. It was Kurt and I, so I really drugged my feet. I didn't have a truck available to go get it because I was worried about screwing up my system. So we made Kurt do it first, and it worked out fine. And now, like in my well water, where I have 150 acres of irrigation there, the well water is 7.4, so it's too high. So I don't turn it on without plant food. It lowers the pH, plus, you know, you're spoon feeding nutrients all the time.
And it's getting rid of those bicarbonates. So back to the chemistry of what it's doing, it neutralizes the bicarbonates in the water, which makes all the other nutrients more available.
Exactly. Then we will OO62 water soluble potash. We will buy that, and like my 3 sons, they know what 1,200 pounds of OO62 looks like. We'll put it in a pro box, raise it up to forklift, dump it on top of a semi-load. It's 5 miles to town, drive to town and back. It's all shook up. We put it through the drip. It's a pretty rocket science situation, I can tell you. KISS method at Garrett Land and Cattle. Keep it simple. Stupid. Yes. Yeah, and I mean, you know, you're not supposed to put a basic fertilizer through the drip. You need to put acid through the drip. So we're cleaning we're cleaning the drip every time we irrigate, and we just have not had any problems.
Anybody have any other questions? So potassium, so this was one of the nutrients that when I met with Kelly, I said, this is probably the #1 nutrient that people aren't getting out there in a great enough quantity. So there's tons of potassium in the soil, okay? The problem is that it's typically tied up within the clay, and the secret to having nutrient availability is it has to be spilling out. Okay, so basically you have to overfill the gas tank. When you overfill the gas tank, then it becomes within the soil solution. So I told Kelly, I'm like, you just got to start putting it on. Put as much on as you can. And just keep doing that. And if you keep doing that, and you keep that in check with your nitrogen, your yields will go up. And I attribute a lot of the yield gains, not only on our farm, but on Kelly's, to applying lots and lots of potassium. And everyone asks the question, are you using potassium chloride? And the answer is always yes. And everyone says, that kills everything. Well, let's face it. I already nuked and paved everything 50 years ago when Grandpa came and lost half the organic matter. So the reality is I have to take a broken system and try to rejuvenate it. So that means I have to supplement in some way, shape, or form nutrients that are not currently in the biological system. So when you apply potassium chloride, chloride will leave the system unless you tied it all up in some other structure, which just doesn't happen unless there's certain instances, but we don't really worry about it. Kelly asks me probably every 2 weeks because he's talked to somebody else, and I'm like, what do you think's been going on in your farm? Is it causing you an issue? No, I think it's great. Keep going. I mean, all the guys that have produced big yields, their potassium fertilizer source is potassium chloride. So it's pretty hard for me to argue with. But I think there's a detriment to applying salts to the soil. Hello? But that's what all fertilizer is. All the fertilizer that we buy is a salt that we're basically putting out there. So you can't argue one salt for the other salt. And I am a firm believer that this nutrient, everyone says, oh, we got all our NP and K taken care of. Except we don't.
We have a 2510 John Deere high-speed bar. That's where we put our anhydrous on. It also has a 9-ton dry tank on it, and we put the potassium in the strip with the anhydrous. In our soils, when we're broadcasting it, it just gets tied up. We want it to be in that strip. And we really think that that has made a huge difference. We're putting on like 300 pounds of product. So it's approximately 200 pounds of actual K. And then with the plant food, you know, like in a dry land setting with the plant food, there's another 25 pounds of K there. So we're putting on about a pound of K, at least a pound of K for every pound of nitrogen. And a lot of people, I remember as a young farmer, everybody put on a 50-50 or 60-60, where we wonder why we have a yield ceiling and we wonder why our gas tank's empty. Our soils are depleted. And we're trying to rebuild them.
So the way that you build that tank is you have to understand all the ingredients that go into it. And I told Kelly when I first met him, big yields make bigger yields if you fertilize correctly. So as you produce more yield, you should have the cost of goods to invest back into the operation. And so that's what we've been doing. And you have yet to achieve, every year there's a concern that there's going to be some yield ceiling, but you haven't achieved that yet.
No, we're never happy because we don't ever get the yield we want. Steve has stolen all my happiness. Like 230 bushel corn removes 85 pounds of P and 64 pounds of K. So you're going to put a 50-50 out there and then you wonder why you got a yield ceiling and it's always the poor seed dealer's fault. It's not, it's yours. You're not putting enough out there. And it's that simple. It's science, it's math.
And then the thing with potassium is that, and this is true for all nutrients, but there's a critical concentration that you have to achieve to overcome what the soil is taking away. So if I farm in sand, that critical concentration is much lower to create available potassium. If I have loam with some clay in it, that's a higher number. If I have clay, that's an even higher number. So I can take a soil sample and show that I've got 600 parts per million potassium, but I don't have any potassium. So you have to understand what is that critical concentration that creates available K. So there's some work that has been done. Most people have, discredited in academia of the base saturation. Okay, so base saturation is just a calculation based off of the numbers that go in to create your CEC number. My opinion is that you have to have about 5% K on your base saturation. That'll give you a direction. Now what changes when you ban K, that critical concentration is multiplied, right? Because you're not exposing it to that much soil. So we anecdotally feel that we're getting a benefit from banded K, even more so than Kelly doesn't ban phosphorus. We might add that to a planter application to get some early season phosphorus, because that's probably one of the things that we're missing a little bit of. But then we've got all this phosphorus that's basically in this organic acid. So it stays available. And then, in dry land, it's amazing. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. But we feel like the way to keep K available is to band. And you got to band a lot of it. Because if you're going to raise 300 bushel corn, you got to have 330 pounds of K to grow the plant and the grain. So there's all sorts of stuff, and again, this will be available to you, so I'm not going to go through all these, but I wanted you to have what these different nutrients do, and potassium is the regulator. So it manages the water exchange. So if I'm in the business of managing photosynthesis, okay, water is a pretty small molecule. CO2 is pretty big, and they come in through the stomata. Well, there's boatloads of water spewing out and not a lot of carbon coming in. So I need to make sure that my potassium is high enough in the plant to manage those cells and do a very efficient job. If I don't do that, then I'm just wasting water. So K is like top nutrient on my list to make sure everybody has that bucket checked off. Hit the wrong button. Magnesium. So we've been messing around a little bit with magnesium through K-Mag.
Don't buy any of that.
Magnesium is the central molecule of chlorophyll. So that seems important, right? I mean, you've got to have enough magnesium to drive chlorophyll production, which then influences how efficient you are photosynthetically. We have yet to determine if we've got any gain whatsoever, and it's very expensive. So I'm also an economist, and Kelly loves money, so it's like you can't just go throw
We each bought a semi-load.
Yeah.
We each bought a semi-load. Came out of Minneapolis. We put like 400 pounds of product on because we wanted to get 44 pounds of magnesium per acre. And we put it out there to do it. My dad said, you're dumb. Clifford said, you're dumb, his dad, because we were spending so much money per acre in a small area. And we waited for the yield benefit, and there was zero.
Yeah.
So we don't buy any more of that.
So that either means we're missing something or that isn't the limitation in what we're dealing with, right? But
We had a base saturation idea that we have so much calcium, we need to raise that, we need to bring that number together on the ratio between magnesium and calcium.
and we didn't do a really good job. So maybe we need to look at doing a variety of things. I don't know. We didn't have success with that. We've done it for 2 years, right? With no success. So anyway, magnesium, all about chlorophyll. Sulfur is something that I think everybody needs to make sure they've got in their system. I mean, you've got to have sulfur. We're not getting it for free anymore. It's one of the biggest things that we both do on our farms is apply copious amounts of sulfur, primarily because we have high pH soils that we need to manage around. But again, plant food is a primary source of sulfur on both of our farms. And it's, again, building blocks of amino acids and proteins. This is nitrogen's sister. And you got to have the right mix of those two to manage around that. You have anything to add on? So calcium. We have a lot of calcium in the soil, and some could argue that it's not available calcium. One of the things that I'm concerned about is putting on more calcium in an already very high calcium environment. I have experimented around with it. I haven't ever seen a result from that. Calcium is unbelievably important for nutrient availability. It pulls in a lot of nutrients. It's a carrier of a lot of nutrients. And it's integral in plant structure and disease and insect suppression. It's kind of like when your mom told you drink milk as a kid, build strong bones. That's what calcium does in the plant. We feel like we have enough calcium, so we're not really looking at it. And when we apply plant food, we solubilize some of that calcium, making it available to the plant.
We'd love to get rid of calcium. It's a problem for us.
So boron. So we started to look at boron 2 years ago? Yep. 2 years ago. So I have been applying liquid boron. We have applied liquid boron on Kelly's, and then you've been using, what's the product that you've been using?
It's from US Borax. They have two great products, Granubor and Solubor. Granubor, I like that because it's a big crystal. So they want to say it's a slow release. The only reason it's slow release is because of the size of the particle. I will put that with the potassium through that 2510 bar, so it's in that strip. Solubor is much like that water-soluble potash, and you can mix that up with suspends. We have been using more liquid boron, but we're going to go away from that. I'm going to use Solubor. It's a 20% product. It'll be better. I really like that from the US Borax. Boron is so leachable. It goes away. My friend Chad Henderson in Madison, Alabama, he's going to take a couple acres this year and see how much boron it takes to kill a corn crop. Because everybody talks about putting too much boron on and having this toxicity, but we really think it's a yield limiting factor like Kurt's chart showed where, everybody's underneath. You just need to if you have a way to constantly apply it, it needs to be done. Broadcasting, it's a bad idea. A dry product. What are the odds you putting a couple pounds on per acre and the plant's going to find it? I don't like further feeding it. Boron has to go through the roots. So people are going to foliar feed it, and then they're going to send in a tissue sample and tell you, look what they accomplished. It's just a residue on the leaf. If you don't have a way to apply it that you can get it in the root system, you're wasting your money. That's my opinion.
Got a question coming in from online here. Are you concerned about too much potassium in strip? You mentioned 300 pounds, 0060. That seems like a lot in strip.
When we apply that in the fall, things like that, we have not had any, we were a little scared of it the first time, but it has never been a problem in 3 years. No, we don't worry about it. We anhydrous and we come back and plant. And
So I've been a habitual high K user in banding situations. And I have yet to find where I felt like it penalized me. It's a function of depth. It's like anhydrous. Depth and quantity. So as you get bigger and better root systems and more time for that product to dissipate, the better off you are. So is there a threshold? Yes. Have we experienced it? No.
like boron or any of these micronutrients we're about to get into, that's like a hot button word, micronutrients and biologicals. Number one, if you don't address your pH, don't put money into micronutrients because they're going to get tied up if you have pH issues. And but micronutrients are very important. Matt Swanson was in Illinois. He just won national yield contest on dry land. He made the statement, his Twitter handle is Max ROI Farmer. He's not throwing a bunch of stuff out there to see what happens. He is very, very conscious about his budget. He says that his micronutrient budget is larger than his overall fertilizer budget was when he started because he thinks they're that important. So that's what the level of them is or are, but just don't address the other things before you do that. Otherwise, you're wasting your money.
Yeah, Bill.
Did your buddy in Alabama kill his corn crop?
That's right. He's planting it right now. He's going to see what it takes today. Everybody, people talk about putting a couple pounds of boron out there. It's just not enough. But everybody worries about putting too much out there because they think they're going to kill it. So Chad's going to find out what it takes.
What do you think the number will be?
I think it'll be to 10 because I think it leaches out. In our soils, it leaches out so much. I think it'll be very high.
So Kelly's banding it, and we band it with planter application and then wide drop application. And anytime we run nitrogen, we run boron. So we'll put on, in the irrigated ground, we'll put on 2 pounds. And most of that, depending on timing and if we need to do anything else, but most of that is surface applied because I want to create the leach bloom that exists with boron. And nitrogen is similar, right? So one of the biggest concerns that I've always had with our drip irrigation is if I have a nutrient that will move very readily, do I lose it out the bottom? So we've been experimenting around with what should we be surface applying, what should we be carrying in the drip, and from my perspective, we have a lot of success with some surface applications of nutrients. And then I think things like K, definitely, if you can run those through drip, phosphorus through drip, you can always put boron through drip, but then remember that your concentrations change. So how much of that can you keep going? So boron, a little bit on boron, it's all about flowering and reproductive and seed set. So if you put it on early in the season, it's got to get you to flowering. So it's not one of those things that it just sticks around. I mean, it'll leave quicker than anything. So keep that in mind with boron. It's a difficult to manage nutrient, and you've got to make multiple applications to be successful with it. And again, we don't foliar feed boron. We've done some different experiments, but basically we believe that it's got to move up through the plant. Chlorine is another essential nutrient. So if you're a wheat farmer, this is a very important nutrient. It's all about just energy transfer. It takes very low quantity, but it is important. So that comes with chloride. Manganese. Anybody doing anything with manganese? So manganese is something that if you're a soybean grower, you probably want to look at. Corn is not quite as responsive, but definitely something that needs to be in the mix because we're not really getting it from anywhere. But if you want to have something that you can foliar feed, this is a great nutrient to use. And foliar feeding is not a one-time, I'm done with it. You got to keep making applications to get the gain. Also important as seed treatment and influences germination. So as I was talking about what's in the seed, this is something that you have to pay attention to. So one of the things is having a micronutrient packet that's around getting the seeds started right. So that's something that Kelly's done. We feel like a starter should be micronutrient payload and biologicals. And we don't really feel like you need NPK in the furrow. That's kind of dangerous. We just want get the germination process right and get the biologicals right. And then 2 by 10 out to get your other macro stuff.
Exactly.
Steve, would you also apply manganese when you apply glyphosate?
Typically, I don't recommend applying anything with glyphosate because glyphosate originally was it was a binding, it was a chelator type product. So anytime you tank mix anything with glyphosate, it's not very reactive. So if you're making a glyphosate application, you have to have the recovery. So you have to make 2 applications, in my opinion. So if you're mixing these foliar products with glyphosate and you're not seeing any responses because that's what glyphosate is supposed to do. Iron, we don't really do anything with iron. There's a lot of iron that's in plant food, so we're kind of getting that. Iron is really critical for chlorophyll, greenness. I've done a lot of work with iron from in areas that are alkaline where you have like iron chlorosis in soybeans, trying to shore that up. It's hard to get enough to fix that problem, right? It's still a function of the pH problem that we have. It's really hard to overcome that. So we think that iron is important in our high pH soils, but we think we're getting enough through plant food. But this is something that you can also foliar feed. Nickel, not doing anything with nickel. I'm going to skip through a couple of these. Copper. This would be something that you could look at applying later in the season during grain fill. We have not done a lot of that where we've been putting on a micronutrient payload for grain fill. Something that I definitely think has merit, especially as you start looking at here's these high molecular weight materials that are really important to have in the seed. So if they're really important to have in the seed, you got to put it on there when it's making the seed, right? The other challenge is when you have immobile nutrients, foliar feeding is hard to accomplish, right? Because it's not moving. So you have to make those applications at the right time, or you have to feed it, which is where drip can benefit. And we haven't done anything with copper. We've done a fair amount with zinc. There's zinc in plant food and then planter applied zinc. And I still am a big advocate. You got to feed as much stuff as you can through the root system. And then last but not least here, molybdenum, which if you were going to take nitrogen and boron, you should add molybdenum to that application. They all work hand in hand to make the magic happen. So that's a nutrient. I've messed around with it. We haven't done it on your farm, but I do think it has some merit. We just have not done a lot of it. Definitely the big 2 micronutrients like what Kurt showed, boron and zinc, and that's been a big focus, especially getting boron right for us because the soils are out of whack and we're trying to buffer against that. And Kelly, your last NCGA this last year, describe the terrain in that field. Will you describe that? Because most people just think, oh, it's this flat piece of dirt over here in the corner, you know.
It's an 80-acre parcel, and it lays north and south, and where the winning 2.5-acre, 3-acre entry was in a draw, and the rows are planted northeast, southwest. So it's not by any means flat. For us, it's not steep, but Tim and Kurt won't ride with me in the combine anymore because they get scared. But these rows are going to the southwest, so when the sun comes up, you talk about harvesting sunlight. When the sun comes up, there is sunlight going down these rows all day. And there's a real advantage to that. If you could plant southwest, northeast in our area, or maybe straight east and west versus north and south, it depends on the year what your yield gain is going to be. There's really something to that. Kevin Matthews, our friend in North Carolina, he took a 400-acre bottom and turned it into two 200-acre bottoms because he planted half of it east and west, half of it north and south. And I think he ended up with like a 12 bushel yield advantage that year, if I remember correctly. The sunlight going down the rows was a big deal.
And both, Kelly, I've been strip cropping for probably, 12 years. So corn and soybeans, and that's all about solar gain. So, my opinion is if you are going to farm in a 50-50 rotation, it might as well be in the same field. And that can give you huge efficiencies in what you're doing from a nutrient standpoint, and it lends itself to these last three nutrients of hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, which makes up roughly 95% of your plant. So where do you get your hydrogen? Water. So H2O. Hydrogen is one. It's a little bitty guy connected to oxygen. So remember that that's a relatively small molecule. CO2 is big. And you have to think about that. When you're exchanging in this freeway, there's a lot more water leaving than CO2 coming in. So water use efficiency and solar efficiency are critical to get big yields. And you'll hear a lot of people talk about, the sunlight just wasn't right for this period of time. That's absolutely true. If during grain fill, you can stretch your grain fill out to say 70 days through plant health and nutrition, but let's say that the last 2 weeks of grain fill, it's a poor solar radiation. How much yield can you lose in the last 2 weeks? Well, if you set the stage for 600 bushel, the last week is roughly 10%. 2 weeks is a quarter or more. So there we're talking about losing 30+% of our yield in the last 2 weeks. And you don't get grain fill, long grain fill windows, without good nutrition and good plant health. And again, I'll preach a little bit more on potassium. That's the plant health nutrient. You've got to have it to get these three guys, because that's really what we're farming. We're all carbon farmers. That's what you're after. You sell a bushel of corn, it's mostly carbon. So that's, in a nutshell, a little bit about the different nutrient programs that we're running. We're happy to answer any other questions. Just a real quick look. So this is target tissue values. So this is, I've been working on this for a couple of years to understand what trajectory can we set. So this is 600 bushel corn, 0.65 pounds of grain, which tells me how many plants I need to produce. Then this is the target of the entire plant, the target values that I need to have to get to my total use. And you'll see that, like in nitrogen, those values change at the end in the plant tissue, because where's it going? To the grain. But notice, these values are relatively stable all the way through there, because they have to be. So that leads me to another question. What will my tissue values look like if I understand the whole mass of the plant in relationship to the way that we currently tissue test? Because if we're in a depleted environment, if that nutrient value isn't staying elevated, that means that we're producing more biomass and we don't have all the ingredients, right? Because it should be relative. So hopefully we can keep refining this. And again, this is looking at the whole plant, so you can't relate it to the way that we're currently doing it. But this breaks out how much water we need and how much dry matter we have to accumulate. And then that dry matter number changes based on what we're actually doing, but then that will give you a target value. So anyway, that's us. You can follow us on Twitter. That's my handle, @acumen_ag, and Kelly's is @KellyGarrett75. And then putting in a plug, I have a software platform that is free to use that lets you look at profitability analysis on your farm so you can load yield data. If you want to change it, you can pay for it. And Kelly's they just launched extremeag.farm. You want to share a little bit about what you're doing there?
Extremeag.farm are 6 high-yield growers, North Carolina, Alabama, Illinois, Arkansas, I'm in Iowa, obviously, and South Dakota. We are all friends. We've got acquainted through either Netafim and NutraDrip or Hefties. We're all up there in the first step trials at Hefties. And we all do public speaking. We all get asked a lot of questions about, the things that we do that are outside the box or different than the norm. And extremeag.farm is about educating growers and helping them out and shortening their learning curve and helping you avoid some of the mistakes that we have made. 5 of us have irrigation. Corn and soybeans is obviously the highest priority of the crops, but we have winter wheat. Matt Miles in Arkansas plants 5 crops: peanuts, rice, everything. Kevin Matthews has barley in North Carolina. Check out the website, and there's a lot of free content. Some of the content you have to subscribe to get. That's not quite ready yet. That'll be ready at the end of the month, but please check it out.
Part of Arkansas is in.
McGee. It's the southeast corner. Southeast corner of Arkansas.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any soil benchmarks you want to hit, like nitrate, 75, nitrate, or sulfur levels, or any of that stuff is important?
Like in the tissue test or in the
Soil.
In the soil test, we just try to keep building them because we think they're depleted. I would tell you I don't have a benchmark because I'm not there yet. My CECs are 18 to 22, and we keep trying to build them. And the state record in Iowa is 445, and I want to raise 446. And my drip fields, when I started, they were 275, 280. Now they're 290, 295. My dry land, in 2015 was the first time. Well, in 8 and 9 we had 200 bushel corn, but it was incredibly wet. In 2015, then we returned. We had like a 220 bushel yield average. This last year we were like at 243. And that's over 3,000 acres of corn. And we keep putting it out there because we keep putting the 300 pounds of K out there, and we keep putting 500 gallons of phosphorus out there. We're not there yet. I don't have a benchmark, but I know that my gas tank is not full. That would be my answer. I don't mean to not. I apologize. I can't give you a number, but I haven't reached it yet. I don't know.
So one of the things when I first met Kelly, he had a book of soil samples. And I said, how do you fertilize? And he said, well, I use these soil tests. And I said, do those soil tests look like your yield maps? And he said, well, no. And he
told me I was dumb.
And I said, well, don't you think that they should? So understand what a soil test is good at and what it is not good at. A soil test is like a tissue test. It gives you the road ditches. It gives you a place to start. Now, there are some important pieces on a soil test that are very, very repeatable, like pH. Now, understand that pH moves through the growing season because plants exude acids, there's rainfall, there's all of these things. But for us to say that there's some magic number that we need to get to achieve a yield, we don't know if that exists, because what we have to understand is, what do I have to apply, or what do I have to influence in the environment, whether that's that's through soil biology, soil chemistry, or applied nutrition to get it into the plant. I don't have the answer on a soil test to tell you that. I only know that if I'm living within the ranges, because what a soil test is very good at, the odds of economic response. It will tell me if this area is very low testing, the odds of economic response are very high. Kelly, where's your lowest testing areas?
High pH.
High pH and what else? There's 2 places on your farm. The highest
Elevation.
highest yielding.
Oh, highest yielding, yes.
Highest yielding, that's on everybody's farm. For the most part, because in the highest yielding areas, what have you been doing?
Removing the most.
Taking it up. So there's something to learn in that environment, is that that nutrition is available. Typically that nutrition is available because pH is right. And when pH is right, soil biology can be right. When those are outside of that parameter, it's tough. So you have to try to get to that center first. If you don't have your pH right, we don't need to talk about anything else. And then from there, it's a factory for me. The soil is part of that system, but it's still a factory. Now, if I can account for what's in the soil, that adds to my efficiency. But I have to give it a little, I have to say, you're not that efficient at delivering me the goods because you have other problems. If I was in a hydroponic system or I farmed in sand, totally different ballgame. Yes, sir.
How long does it take for a nutrient to become available? You put it through a drip system, you've got it right there. Is it available immediately? I guess when I started drip system, I said, well, if I knew what the plant needed every day, I would get this solution. I'd pump it out in gallons per minute every day. Everything ought to be ideal. I ought to grow 600. But it doesn't seem like it works that way. Is it immediately available? Is there a delay? How do you?
Well, it depends on the form of the material.
Like a typical agronomist, it depends.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're going to put out KTS for your potassium source, I'll tell you it never becomes available. In my opinion, when we're trying to soil that, where'd Kurt go? We're putting first year, my potassium levels are going down in the tissues. Kurt and I are trying to put KTS out. It's never available. When we talked to Steve, Steve said, well, the chemical bond of that is so tight. It wouldn't work. We brought in a Nature's product. It was an 0020 or 0024. In 3 days, we had a tissue response that went up. Also that first year in August, my phosphorus levels are going down, and that's when we started talking, and that's when we ended up putting plant food through there. And it was very early in our careers, but Kurt said nobody in the history of Netafim that he knew had ever been able to raise their phosphorus numbers in corn in the month of August because it's slurping up so much. We put a couple of loads of plant food through the system, our phosphorus numbers went up because it's highly available.
It all depends on that. Depends on what you is it in the available form. If it's in a plant available form and it's in the soil water, it's available whenever that water comes in contact with that root system, assuming that the root system is viable. That's another piece of it, right? Because a root system, root hairs are really only viable for 2 to 3 days. Then it has to regenerate new stuff. That's part of the soil biology, and then how much stuff are you sticking in there that can be damaging to that environment. So there's a balance of what do you need to put in there? Because I think your philosophy is correct. Our struggle is if we get a 6-inch rain event, we've tanked the oxygen in our system, because that's the other piece that we have to keep in check. My opinion is we've been grossly overwatering because we've been trying to manage evapotranspiration and these other parameters, but we were killing the oxygen in our soil. There wasn't any. We had so much water and we didn't have enough available oxygen to keep everything alive.
I won't put on over a 1/10 of an inch water per day. In 17, we had these soil moisture canopies, because our humidity is so high. Tim called me and he said, your crop's under stress. I said, well, Tim, it's 95 degrees with 95% humidity. No kidding. But we couldn't outwater that because the plant couldn't evapotranspirate. We tried, we ended up with a big electric bill. We were putting on like a 1/4 inch of water a day, and now I won't put on over a 1/10. That was something that we learned.
Well, you only put on a 1/10 today that's using 3,500. Are you depending upon the soil to bring the rest of that in? Eventually you're going to deplete it.
We watch our soil moisture probes, and we try to keep an adequate amount in the soil. The last few years, that's not been a problem because it rains so dang much, but there'll be times that it'll start to go down, but I'm telling you, I don't want to put on more than a tenth, but my soil might be different than yours, but I'm going to, yes.
They're very,
Yeah. I can't, I destroy all the oxygen, I chase it all away and it goes anaerobic. We just, we thought these canopy sensors were going to be really neat. I just need an old-fashioned aqua spy. That's what I like. It's on my phone. It's easy. Again, the KISS method.
Yes, sir. Did you do any? Oh, I'm going to repeat the question. The question was, are we doing anything with sugars?
I put some boost out last year. I live really close to Dunlap. There's a QLF plant. I didn't see a response. There's been a guy, his name is Mark Coots from the Tiva Corporation. He's a really nice guy. He's been to my place a couple times. I put some sugars on when I planted winter wheat in a furrow of his product. Of course, he says his product's better than the QLF product. Imagine that. And I will probably try some, in furrow when I plant things. Kevin uses a lot of sugar. Kevin just goes to a dairy and buys food grade molasses. Chad Henderson in Alabama uses the sugar from Mark and the Tiva Corporation. Dan Lefkos uses Boost and QLF. Kevin Kolb in Indiana uses a tremendous amount of sugar from the Tiva Corporation. We think it's kind of inconclusive yet for us. We don't know. We haven't.
So one of the things that plant food provides, since it is a feed, so my opinion is sugar is feeding the biology, right? We think we're getting some of that because we see it in the degradation of the stalks and an accumulation of biology. Maybe we're just offsetting that in a different way that we don't fully understand. I think there's benefit to all of those things because soil biology is a beneficial thing. If you can harness the power of that, it can help offset a lot of things that we can't do with synthetic fertilizer. I've messed around with it for years and I just haven't seen the same responses that other people have.
we're able to use conventional corn over stacks. Any pros and cons there?
We use conventional corn. We thought, conventional corn has a bigger offensive side, but we had the management it takes for the spraying and things like that. There was a minimal gain, but we didn't think it was worth it, and we didn't repeat it.
So my opinion of conventional corn is that if you're not building that protein, you have more energy to build other proteins, right? Which is yield potentially. And that's the assumption in the absence of whatever pests you have. Now, we all have to be honest with ourselves. We have created a system that is not like anything in nature. It is 100%, here's a monoculture. And if you're rotating corn and soybeans, it doesn't matter because your neighbor's got corn right next to it, right? So we have this monoculture that exists, which creates selection pressure. So you have to weigh the pros and the cons of that. My opinion is you have more yield than you can potentially extract from conventional because you're not building that protein. But you got to protect the yield.
You can't spray it with the wrong chemical.
Yeah, you don't want to.
We planted some in a field that had a lot of manure. Well, that had a lot of weeds. My dad thinks it's a really bad idea to use conventional corn again. When the sunflowers came out the top late in the summer, because of all that manure, we're like, we're not doing that again.
What about cover crops?
I use cover crops extensively on our farm. My goal is to have everything cover crop. I don't farm as much as Kelly does, but to me, a cover crop is the secret to keeping your biology satisfied, right? So ultimately, my dream in life is I have a multi-cropping system. So both Kelly and I raise wheat. It's part of being able to integrate some of those things. Kelly uses his wheat to create opportunity to graze, which that's important too. When the bison came across, they did stuff that made this soil. So it's important to me. And I don't look at it like a cover crop. I look at it like another crop. We have to manage it like it's something meaningful not just out there scavenging for whatever is left over, but actually feed it to do its job. And so I'm all about more carbon. How do I get more carbon? All the time.
When we combine the wheat, we'll spray plant food, then we'll just bin run wheat back out there again. Then it'll come up, and it's a great late season pasture source for our cows. On the ground that we chop, we'll plant a cover crop, but otherwise we don't. When we start harvesting, you got all that ground to harvest. We're going to start plant fooding for ourselves, applying a plant food application and for other customers. It's just hard to have enough time to get it all done. And my dad, he says it's hard enough to raise one crop, let alone two, and we just don't put a lot of effort into it, other than that a little bit. Do you have a question?
Talk about starters a little bit. How important are starters in a high yield environment? How much is too much salt? One particular question here online is, in a 2x2x2, is 14 gallons of 28 safe, or 16 gallons of 1034? How much salt is too much in starter?
So I'm not a huge advocate of running any type of, Kelly and I looked at like 624-6, for example, as a starter to get phosphorus up in the furrow. The problem is, my opinion is that the seed has to have it. The seed has to be buffered against that. So micronutrients, that to me is what's important. I think you could run a little bit of starter and be fine. You don't have to be crazy with it, right? And then there's some of these technologies, it's like shoot it right where it needs it. I think that's worthwhile and cool. In the 2x2, yeah, you can put a ton on. You just can't, if your system is like where we would have a contour and maybe you have a coulter that's applying it, then you can get definitely too much in that. You need to have the system back closer to where the seed's actually dropping. Then you don't worry about it. That nutrient's gonna, even phosphorus moves in the soil water if it's available because it's an anion. So it's just when it reacts that it becomes unavailable. So I want to create those little balloons of nutrition. So I would run more. We started with 5 gallons of 624-6. We didn't like that. We went away from that. And last year we just had water, and then we put our biologicals and micronutrients in with that. This year we're going to have like 2 gallons of 3-18-18 in furrow with the biologicals and micros. And then we have one planter with a 2x2 system that will research and irrigated, and we'll put probably like 20 gallons of nitrogen with a couple pounds of that soluble, 3 pounds of soluble on the 2x2 is the plan this year.
Talk about plant date. Especially on your high yield.
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble.
No, that's good.
In 2016, I think it was, I planted beans on April 8th, and I got snowed out. And everybody thought I was crazy, and the beans are tremendous. I mean, our on-farm average that year is like 76 bushel on dry land. And the last couple of years, it has not been conducive to that because of the weather in the late spring. And we don't want to plant corn. I'd really like to not plant corn until the ground temperature is like 60, but that's not viable because my dad will have a stroke. So we're going to have to lower that to like 55. Last year we started about the 1st of May. I thought we were pushing it, because it was cold and wet, but it turned out to be okay. This year I'm going skiing the 3rd week of March because my oldest boys will be on vacation or spring break from school, and that's probably good because when I come back, I'm going to plant beans in March the way the forecast looks. And I will be labeled crazy, but I'm telling you, it's the way to be. The earlier you can plant, in the words of Steve Kilpack, you need to plant the beans sooner or the boogers are going to freeze off. That's when your best yielding beans will be.
Yeah, beans came from a temperate climate. Corn came from a tropical climate. I don't know why we go out there and stick the corn in the ground so it can shiver and be all uneven. I guess that's why we sell more seed, right? So you can try to get more plants that are going to get you to that yield. I'd rather just go plant 30,000 plants and grow 300 bush corn.
Yeah, everybody's at this meeting today to try to make more money. And it's so great when you can make money out of a management technique. Plant your beans soon and your corn later. If you don't take anything else out of here today, the earlier you can plant those beans, the better.
And to echo that, I would say plant your highest potential corn last. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Or once
Within reason, yes.
Within reason, once
Yeah.
it's warm enough.
Yes. Yeah, within reason. I mean, ultimately, the ideal scenario is you could plant it early and it'd be tasseled on the summer solstice. We just don't live in that environment. Now, if we can correct that, then we got something. So part of correcting that is understanding what's in the seed to get you uniformity. But yes, we are habitually holding off when everyone's planting corn. I'm usually working on planters, but
Procrastinating engineer.
yeah, that's right. I'm thinking about what I should be doing.
Yeah, my guys are home right now getting the planters ready, and I want to plant beans in March. Farmer's Almanac says we're going to have a big blizzard in the middle of March, but the forecast doesn't look like that.
Let's go buy more cows.
Yeah, let's go buy more cows.
All right, other questions for these guys? All right, let's give them a hand. Thank you.